Welcome back to Nightly Nonsense, where we attempt to make some sense out of the nonsense. Hey, we've been on this intentionality kick, this intentional kick, done all kinds of different intentionals. The truth is, I could literally do intentional the rest of these nightly nonsenses, right? We can do intentional theology, we can intentional dress, we could do intentional. Let me kind of wrap this up, otherwise you're going to be intentionalized out, right? The truth is, the conclusion to this matter, right, which Ecclesiastes says, is that we need to be more intentional. There's a news flash. Everybody gets that, right? You need to be intentional about the conclusions that you want, the destinations that you want to end up at. We don't end up any place good on a regular basis by accident, right? We end up in places we should be because we're intentional about it, right? If I want to end up in Hawaii, I do not get in my car and hope to get there somehow, right? That's not how you get there. If I want to get to Hawaii, if I wanted to be non-intentional about it, I just start boarding planes and hope that one plane just suddenly lands in Hawaii at some point, right? The math's there. You probably will just keep going from plane to plane to plane to plane to plane, and someday you're going to touch down in Hawaii. But if you really want to get to Hawaii and you really want to enjoy it and go there for a purpose, you got to be intentional about it, right? I buy tickets that are going to get me to Hawaii. Same thing in our Christian life. If you really want all the things that we've talked about, if you want your kids to be educated wise, in a way that is wise, if you, right, want intentionality about how you talk and how you think and how you act, if you want intentionality about what you digest, right, whether that's food or whether that's words or whether that's hearing, look, however it is, whatever it is that you want to be intentional about, you need to have a purpose, right? So the conclusion that I get to, the conclusion I want to get to, I got to be intentional about it. If you want the people around you to get to heaven, you got to be intentional about that. If you want the people around you to grow in the knowledge, right, in wisdom, in stature of God, you need to be intentional about that. Don't just take them to church. Take them to church with a purpose, right? We need to be intentional about where we want to get to. That probably means that you and I need to stop and think about it. So let me give you a broad overview of the life of Jesus. What's the purpose? What was the destination for Jesus for 4,000 years? Everybody in heaven knew exactly what the destination was, what was going to be. By the way, everybody who had a copy of the Old Testament and who had it passed down from person to person, all of the Jewish people, they knew the destination for Jesus. They just missed it, right? They missed the idea that over and over in the Old Testament it says he was going to have to be crucified. He was going to have to be sacrificed. And God wasn't unintentional about those details. He was very intentional about those details, and Jesus fulfilled every single one of them. Jesus lived a life of intentionality. He looked at his disciples and said, here's the deal. Here's the bottom line. I can only do what the Father tells me to do. First of all, stop right there and decide right in this moment whether that's a true statement for you or not. You and I are to be Christ followers, right? We're to be like Jesus. Jesus said, I can only do what the Father tells me I can do. Intentionality, right? Intentionality for the conclusion that God wanted. Do you know that God has a conclusion for you? He's got a destination for you, and he needs you to be intentional about it. When people, including those closest to him, like Peter, right? But when the Pharisees and the Sadducees got in the way, Jesus was intentional about saying, no, get behind me, Satan, he says to Peter, right? No, you're not going to get me off track. The devil himself tried to tempt him to get off track. He wouldn't let that happen. When they got Jesus to the edge of a cliff and were going to push him over, guess what happened? Jesus said, no, not today. It's not going to happen, right? He was intentional about, you're not going to make this happen before God deems it necessary to happen. Are you living a life like that that's intentional in nature? Do you want things so badly that you don't care when they come. God says when they come matters. There's a time for everything, right? When Jesus stood in front of Pilate, and when he stood in front of the Pharisees, the Sadducees, and the Sanhedrin, it says they couldn't get the job done. The Sanhedrin couldn't get the job done. They couldn't find two people to agree. So what happens? Jesus had to convict himself, right? He was in tune with God the Father in the intentionality of the conclusion, which was what? You and I needed a Savior. Jesus did what we couldn't do, right? So we look at this whole thing, and let me wrap it up in a bow, right? If you want to be like Jesus, if you want to live a Christ-like life, then you better be intentional about the things you do, the things you say, and the things that you think, right? I don't care whether or not you like me or don't like me, or you appreciate how I present things or not. That last statement, those things, you should be able to take and evaluate your life. Are you Christ-like? And if you want to say yes to that statement, if you want to walk around and tell people you're a Christ-like follower, then you better be like Christ. You better be intentional about the conclusions that you want to get to. Hey, we'll see you next time. Nightly Nonsense, we're going to get out of the intentionality aspects of all of this and get into something different. So look forward to that. We'll see you.